Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. Say, why do Twitter users make such bad soldiers? They're always too quick to retweet. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at my top 10 introductory war games. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, what we're going to do today, introductory war games. These are games that I think are great games to get people into the hobby of wargaming. To just very light games that they can give them the flavor of wargaming. They may want to graduate to something a little more meaty. I kind of debated: did I want to do this list based on 10 to 1 what was the easiest games to get into, which are the most accessible? Ultimately, I decided no, because that's a little more subjective. So I did what I usually do based on fun. How much fun do I have with these games? That is kind of my ultimate criteria here for this list. Now, I should also point out this list contains multiplayer games, and there are a few solitaire games on this list as well. But they're all fairly light, fairly accessible war games. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. My number 10 is Napoleon Returns 1815 from Worthington Games. Napoleon Returns 1815 is a pretty straightforward game in which you can play up to 3 players, 2 to 3 players. One side, of course, is Wellington and Blücher. The other side is Napoleon. And essentially, you're moving these armies along point to point during the Waterloo campaign. Now, when you have your corps, you have various corps that have health points. And when your corps comes to battle, you then, of course, are going to draw a number of cards. And so depending on your position, the strength of your corps, yada, yada, you're going to draw a number of cards. And then you go back and forth. You play the cards. This is similar to like the We the People combat system, where I play right flank, then you have to match right flank. And then we roll for initiative. And then, I play center attack, you play center attack, and then I play artillery, then you have to play artillery. And we keep going back and forth where the person with the initiative plays a card and the other person has to match that card. As soon as somebody can't match the card, then they lose the battle. So I love that card combat system. I think that is such a fun card combat system, and this is a great way to introduce people into kind of ideas of maneuver and combat. And really enjoyed it quite a bit. So that is Napoleon Returns 1815. That is my number 10, and that is from Worthington. My number 9 is a game, a solitaire game that I first played years ago when it was released by Victory Point Games, and I've recently played it again since it was released by Tabletop Tycoon. I think they've redone Victory Point Games. But this is Hapsburg Eclipse. And I could easily put Ottoman Sunset here, which I had not played before until just recently. But they're very similar games. But Hapsburg Eclipse, of course, you are the rulers of Austria-Hungary. You're in Vienna during World War I. And you have various tracks coming at you. It's a stage of siege game, so you have various military fronts coming at you. And every turn, you're drawing a card. The card is telling you which fronts are advancing. It's also telling you, you may have rebellions in certain parts of your country, like Hungary or Czechoslovakia or Slovakia, Slovenia, whatever. There's various tracks that are going into rebellion. And so then you get certain action points. So you can go ahead and you can spend those action points to push the armies back. You can try to stabilize the rebellions in your country. And there's various other things you can do. There's other things you can do. There's off-map battles, like battles on the Western Front or at sea, that you can kind of contribute resources to in order to make it more likely that the Axis powers will win that. You can get help from Germany that can help you on some of the die rolls. So it's really a fun game of just kind of holding on by your fingernails as all your enemies are advancing. Tremendously fun game. I love it quite a bit. This is number 9. That's Hapsburg Eclipse. That is from Victory Point Games, Tabletop Tycoon. My number 8 is a game I played fairly recently, and this is really cool because it's a game that combines a traditional war game with a more conventional hidden movement game. And this is The Hunt from Salt and Pepper Games. Now, in The Hunt, one of you takes on the role of the Royal Navy, one of you takes on the role of the German Kriegsmarine with the Admiral Graf Spee, and you are moving your ship off board. That is to say, you're writing down where you're going. You're trying to hunt down convoys and destroy them. Meanwhile, the British are trying to get their convoys home, and they're trying to hunt down the Graf Spee. you're playing cards. This is a CDG essentially. You're playing cards that you can either trigger the events on, or you can or you can play it for the action points. And the action points give you a lot of abilities to move and to search for your enemies and what have you. But there comes a point in the game where you may trigger a battle, and if you trigger the battle, then you two are actually playing cards to fight each other. And again, playing them for either the events or for the points. But really, really fun game. It's a great, like I say, mashup of war game and hidden movement game. Really enjoy it quite a bit. This is The Hunt. That is from Salt and Pepper Games. That's my number 8. My number 7 is a game I played fairly recently. This latest iteration. I played the earlier iteration before, but this is Bismar Solitar Deluxe. Great solitaire game, I think, to get people into the hobby because, again, it's very simple. It's you can move your ships. You've got the Bismarck, the Prince Eugen, and a German U-boat. You're playing the German, and you're moving them in the Atlantic. And then you roll a die, and then you roll a couple of dice, and the dice tell you where they give you kind of a grid, and it tells you where certain British ships are operating. So you may find yourself in combat. You may find yourself with targets of opportunity, like convoys and whatnot. But if you get into combat, then you have a roll off against them. And it's a pretty simple, usually a 50-50 on a D6 roll. But you can engage in tactics. You can close in where your firepower counts for more, but you're more vulnerable, or you can pull back where you're less likely to get a hit, but you're less likely to be hit. So you have some options there. And there's a lot of different missions that you can play, so there's some variety there. But I really like Bismarck Solitar Deluxe. That is a fun, engaging game, and it's easy to learn, easy to play, and I think it's a great solitaire game to get into the hobby with. So this is number 7. That's Bismarck Solitar Deluxe, and that is from Worthington. My number 6 is another game that I just played this year for the first time, and this is a game of aerial combat. This is Fighters of the Pacific. Fighters of the Pacific is a great game where you have these groups of fighters on hexes, and you are attacking your enemy. But there's also ships that you can go after and targets on land and whatnot. But how it works is you have altitude. If you're on one side, your fighters are on one side, they belong to one altitude. But you can switch their altitude. You can flip them over so they're lower altitude or higher altitude. But whenever there are groups that are together, they're flying in formation, that gives you higher initiative. And then as soon as they break up, you have more individual groups, then you get lower initiative. And so it really pays to have groups flying in formation. But as soon as you make contact with the enemy, that's harder and harder to maintain. So it's a really, really fun and interesting game. Now, the only issue here is, and it's not an issue for me because it totally works for me here. Normally, I'm not a fan of it, but it works for me here, and that is deterministic combat. Meaning, if you've got an enemy in your firing arc, in your line of sight, in the range, they automatically take a hit. Unless they haven't been activated, they can activate to get out of the way. But other than that, they're going to take a hit. So there is some deterministic combat for those of you who love dice, and I do love dice. And normally I don't like deterministic combat, but it just works here. It's actually super fun. Fighters of the Pacific is a fantastic aerial war game that is, again, super easy to play, super easy to learn, and easy to teach. Great introductory war game. That is number 6. That is Fighters of the Pacific. That is from Ares Games. My number 5, gosh, this is another one I played this year. No, was it this year or last? I think it was earlier this year. Either earlier this year or last year. I can't remember. Not too long ago. But this is another solitaire game, and it's another game maybe a hair more complex than some of the other solitaire games I've said, but still I think this is a good introductory game because it's not that complex. And this is Stalingrad, Advance to the Volga, 1942. This was a game that I played that just blew me away. First of all, just how much fun it is, but also too, its relative simplicity. Essentially, you are the Germans. You're moving into Stalingrad, and you have your units. When you attack, you're assigning a lead unit, but you have other units coming in. But when you move into a space with a Russian unit, you flip it over. You don't know what it is. You know the terrain, but you don't know what it is. And these different events trigger, and you have to fight based on these events. And it's so good. And you're trying to bring in support. You're trying to bring in artillery and aircraft and other things that are going to support your attack to give you the numbers you're going to need. And the problem is, for all the attacks you got to do, because you only got so much time to do it, for all the attacks you got to do, there isn't enough support. And you got to make the best out of what you can. It's a great game. It is a fantastic game. And I know the designer is working on kind of more games in this series, and I'm super excited about that. I think there's a Philippines one. I thought I heard there's going to be a Berlin one. But anyway, great system. Really a lot of fun and a great introductory solitaire war game. So this is number 5, Stalingrad, Advance to the Volga, 1942. Now my number 4 is a game that is, I'm going to say it's kind of representative of a genre of game, of a family of games, and this one is probably the most accessible. And this is Memoir 44 by Days of Wonder. Memoir 44 is a commands and colors game. So if you're not familiar with that, which you should be by this point, this is a, you have your center and you have your right and your left flank. And you have your units on the board. And as you play these cards, you activate units in the different flanks or the center of the board here. And they go ahead, they attack, they deal damage, they move, etc., etc. But this is such a light and engaging game. It's from Days of Wonder, which doesn't do war games, right? They usually do some pretty interesting, regular board games. And so it's interesting that they would do this as this really super accessible war game. In fact, I know people that are not war gamers, that don't like war games, that play this game that still love it. But I think this is a way to get people that are not interested in war games, that are or maybe would like to learn more about war games, but they want to learn basic things again, like maneuvering and combat and stuff like that. I think this is a great way to go. So that is Memoir 44. That is from Days of Wonder. My number 3 is one of the great all-time light war games. It's one of the games, first of all, and I've mentioned this hundreds of times on the channel, this is the game that really got me interested in World War II and is the reason why today I have a PhD in World War II history. This is Axis and Allies, and it could be any Axis and Allies here. It was originally by Milton Bradley. Avalon Hill had it a while. Axis and Allies is currently being published by Renegade Game Studios, got the license. In fact, they've sent me a couple of Europe and Pacific. I got to get those played because they're Axis and Allies, right? I actually played, not too long ago, I played Axis and Allies World War I with Kim, and she has never played Axis and Allies before. And I was wondering, and she's played a few lighter war games before. She played Fighters of the Pacific with me, but she's not, and she's played Memoir 44 too, but war games are not her thing. But she played Axis and Allies, and I was wondering if she'd really dig it, and she did. She loved it. She really got into Axis and Allies, the World War I Axis and Allies. They're just a great series of games, super easy to learn to teach. The only downside is they do take a while. You can be playing a game of Axis and Allies for several hours. But if that's not a factor, these are great games to teach people how to play war games, what war games are, committing of resources, and again, tax and learning basic die rolls and probability on die rolls and what you want to commit where. Great game. I freaking love Axis and Allies to this day. I do like War Room better, which Larry Harris is the next evolution of Axis and Allies, but I find I still do enjoy Axis and Allies quite a bit. I know before I had said War Room kind of killed Axis and Allies for me. In fact, I ended up selling a bunch of my Axis and Allies stuff, and I kind of regret that now because I had so much fun the other day playing Axis and Allies World War I with Kim. And I'm really looking forward to playing the Europe and the Pacific, probably with her, at least one of them with her in the future. Great games. And I also heard they're doing a G.I. Joe Axis and Allies game. And I love G.I. Joe. When I was a kid, I collected G.I. Joe. And then I played Axis and Allies. That's going to be freaking awesome. So that is number 3. That's Axis and Allies, and that is from Renegade Game Studios. All right. For number 2, this is a game that Joel Eddy of Drive Thru Review, he called this the Ticket to Ride of war games. And I totally see where he's coming from, and I totally think that's the case. This is a game that when you're playing it, it's very much about area control. And so it feels a lot of times more like a conventional war game. But there's dice rolling, there's random initiative that comes up. So it's really a fantastic game. There's card play, too. You play cards for events or for what have you. This is 1775 Rebellion. This has traditionally been a top 10 game of all time for me. Maybe I need to do my top 100 next year. It's been a while since I've done a top 100. I think it was 2020 when I did top 100. Maybe next year I'll do another top 100 list. But 1775 is almost always been in my top 10 games of all time. It's a great game in the American Revolution. There are 4 factions. You've got the British regulars and the loyalists. You've got the American Continental Army and the militias. And so these 4 factions have to work together. One of the things I love about this game is between those the two sides. Now each faction, there's right, they're on the British are on a side, the Americans are on a side, but you've got 2 factions on each side, and they're working together. And I love that kind of team game and the negotiation between team members. I love that so much. It's just fantastic. Played this game several times. Pretty much everybody I played it with has loved it. I played a game when I was in Wyoming with some of my friends there, and it ended early, and it wasn't the best, and I felt bad because I wanted to play it with them again because I really wanted to see what this game could do, and we never got around to it. But 1775 Rebellion is just fantastic. I love this game so much. There are other games in this series, like 1754, 1812, 878 Vikings. They're all good. They're all awesome, but 1775 is the best, in my opinion. I absolutely love this game. So that is number 2. That is 1775 Rebellion. That is from Academy Games. And finally, my number 1. Now, this game, I would say, is probably a great gateway game for people that want to get into wargaming that do have a pretty solid footing in regular gaming, right? In more conventional board games, specifically those who understand the basics of a deck builder, because this is, of course, Undaunted Normandy. Undaunted Normandy is fantastic. It is a tactical war game, but it is also a deck building game. And how you and the cards you draw, and when you play them, that allows you to move your units on the board. Riflemen, scouts, machine gunners, snipers, mortar companies, etc., etc., tanks in some of the later iterations of the game. There's all sorts of things, all sorts of units that you use with these cards, and then the cards let you draw other cards or let other units move a second time. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this game in terms of both deck building and tactical wargaming. Now, some people have some wargamers have criticized this game because there's no real line of sight issues, and there's no nothing like that, which is, of course, a very important thing in a lot of war games. But this is why this makes it such a great introductory war game. It's because people can play it and they don't have to get bogged down with a lot of those other rules. This gives them the flavor of a tactical war game, and then it can maybe lead them further on. But it's just a heck of a game in its own right. I love Undaunted Normandy because of the deck building and because of the tactical wargaming aspect of it. So that is my favorite. And then, of course, there's other games in this series, North Africa, the Stalingrad, which is the campaign game. It's got the reinforcements pack, which is gives it the tanks, and you can play a 2v2 team game with that, which is my favorite way to play it. And then, of course, there's also the Battle of Britain, which is kind of the airplanes fighting in World War II over Britain. Love all these games. Undaunted Normandy is such a great intro war game. That is why it is my number 1, and it's so much fun, if I may say so. So my number 1 is Undaunted Normandy, and that is from Osprey Games. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. Again, what do you think? What do you think are some great intro war games? What do you think of my list? Are there some that should not be on there? Do you really like some of them? Let me know. I'm always eager to hear. I just ask, please keep it civil. Please leave a comment on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, on thediscriminatinggamer.com. Please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. I'd also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history and books on history, fun things like that. Please check that out, and please subscribe to that channel. It would mean a lot to me. Please leave a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek as well. And if you really do like the content we provide here on this channel, I would humbly ask you to go ahead and click on the Super Thanks button here on the YouTube page and leave a tip. Again, we really appreciate that. You know, I had this soldier friend, and I kept asking him what rank he was. He just said it's private. Please somebody help me on my feet again, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band. God knows that I love to fight, but I don't ever win. It's a fine line to damnation, but God let me
in. Well, it's all calm. We've had some laughs. 1 or 2 tears. But I tell you what, it's been fun.
And anything else you want to say? Something amusing?
I'll try. Let me, you didn't like that one. All right. Well, SaltCon, I tell you, I've been to many a board game convention, but none has enlivened my spirits as much as this one. This is the only one I've been to, but it's been very good. Thank you, SaltCon.